I had one of those experiences where you feel the devil, right? And he comes after you. And I never felt anything like that. And I think those things are kind of, scary to talk about too. But I know that he's real and I know that he wants me.
So, one thing about me is I love my naps. Like, especially a good Sunday nap after church. That is the best. I just love a cozy nap. The Cozy Earth sheets are so silky and they're soft, and they just make taking a nap just the best experience. My sheets in the past have been cotton, they're really scratchy. The thing that's really nice about the Cozy Earth sheets is they keep me cool at night. My husband loves them. My kids are always wanting to sleep in our bed. We got to kick them out because they love how cozy and soft our sheets are. You can try them today with a 100-night sleep trial. Try them out. If you don't love them, return them hassle-free, but trust me, you're not going to want to return them. They are so nice. There's a 10-year warranty because once you feel this level of comfort, you're going to want it to last. So head to cozyearth.com and use my code COMEBACK for 20% off. And if you get a post-purchase survey, make sure to let them know that you heard about Cozy Earth right here on the Comeback Podcast. Because home isn't just where you live, it's how you feel. So let's go home with Cozy Earth. Okay, Dallin, I am so excited to have you on the podcast. I don't have any context for your story. So it's always exciting when the other girls have done the pre-screen and everything. And so and I get to come in here and just hear it for the first time. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I think it's cool that you do it that way. I mean, guys, I guess it makes it genuine, right? All your reactions and things, which, I mean, I'm sure you've heard everything at this point, but
I really
yeah.
have, but honestly, like it's just I have the best job ever, you know? So, um,
Yeah, you're doing a good work.
well, thank you so much. I have this gift for you. This chain necklace. It says disciple on it,
Oh, nice.
and chains are all the rage right now.
They
So,
are.
no better way to express your discipleship. It's really cute. I mean, cool. I'm used to saying cute about the women's jewelry, but it's very
No, I,
cool. And I will send it your way. And then you can just always represent that you are a disciple of Christ. So,
that's perfect. I love it. I'll wear it. So I'll send you some pictures.
yeah, send me some selfies. There's literally nothing that makes my heart more happy than seeing people's selfies in their memoir jewelry. So, can't wait. I'm going to hold you to that. Okay, so give us a little bit of background about you. Like where you live, are you married? Like tell us a little bit about you and then we'll jump into your story.
Yeah. So right now I am married. But it's great. I have a great wife. I've got 3 kids. My oldest is 3.5, almost 4. I guess so, between 3.5 and 4. And then I have a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old. And
Oh my
so
gosh,
that's,
so you just got 3 all together. That's
yeah, and
awesome.
kind of went faster than we thought, but it's been such a blessing and it's been hard and it's been a good learning experience. Um, my life has been incredibly busy for the last year, which honestly is great. Idleness is never good for me. So,
Yeah.
I work a full-time job. I work in the architecture field. I'm in a really niche field. I'm a lighting designer. And so architects hire us on as a consultant and we get to work on really fun projects. And most of my, work is in Los Angeles, New York, Aspen, those kind of areas. And so I get to kind of get around, and my bosses are awesome and let me schedule flexible. And, so I'm able to be with my kids a lot still. And then I kind of do a little side business. I've done a couple, I've taught gun safety classes that I do some of that still. And I do stump grinding and I just stay super busy, but had to dial it back a little bit recently. That's about I think I'm at 5 months now. I got called into a bishopric in my family ward, and that,
Nice.
I mean, you say that, but I'm not sure that that's the right reaction. No, it's been a good learning experience, and it's just will add into this of what God is asking me to learn. And I'm very humbled by all the opportunities He's given me for myself to learn. Especially my favorite thing is to be engaged with the young men. So last week I was on a camp with them, and I get to spend a lot of time where I struggled at that age, and really work with them. So it's a blessing that way.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, okay, I'm excited to hear your story. So let's jump into it.
Yeah, and I'll try to keep myself composed. Sometimes I get a little bit teary-eyed, so
That's okay. We're used to it around here. So,
yeah, I'm sure. And I love all the stories you guys do. So, but I first just wanted to say that I think throughout my whole experience, I feel so much gratitude, and I have such a strong testimony for God. I mean, we've heard it so many times now, but that whole relentlessly pursuing thing from Elder Kieran, right? Like, I know for a fact that that is what he did to me. He snatched me. We hear from Alma the Younger, we hear from other people, and I know that's a repetitive story too. But I think it engages so many people at this point because, especially in some of the cultures we live in, that it's difficult to stay a disciple of Christ when the world doesn't see that as something interesting. And so I know he chases us, and it's funny because I think about it that way, literally chasing, and all we have to do is turn around and try to embrace him. And turning around is the hardest part
mhm,
because it's turning from the world, right? But
right.
I
So
would say
true.
that's what I've started to learn, and that's what I've started to do, and I'm still in the process of turning fully towards him and rejecting, physical, spiritual, every kind of Babylon, and I think that that's the journey in a lot of ways. So I'll get into it, but I was born here. I was born in Salt Lake City, but mostly grew up in South Jordan and Harriman areas. Um, I have a great family. I have three sisters. I have two parents that they care about me and love me. I you know, feel an intense sense of gratitude to them for everything they've done for me. Um, I was born into the covenant, which is a great blessing, and my parents were good examples to me. Did want to start with there's on my dad's side of the family, he's from a ranching family in Arizona, and they have this attitude of just nothing matters except toughness in a lot of ways. And so some of these defining characteristics that have been handed down from my family are part of this. And so I was this small little kid my whole life. I didn't grow until I was 16. And, I was always the smallest kid and I had a big mouth. And so that's part of it, right? So my dad's side, it was all about toughness. I always tried to act tough. I put on senses of bravado when I've always been more sensitive than I act. And so embracing that has been a big part of this. And on my mom's side, we have this huge sense of perfection. Like her family in the church is just everything's about perfection and to the detriment of certain things because they hide problems and mistakes instead of resolving them, and bringing Jesus Christ into that mix. And they're great people and they're all super solid. It's just an attitude that has been carried down of don't tell me what to do first off, but also I'm perfect and I follow Jesus Christ. So it's a big part of it as well. But as I was growing up, I would say one of the defining characteristics too was I had a really rocky relationship with my mom. Me and her have such a great relationship now, and we're so similar that we butted heads, right? And so that was part of it too. But when I grew up, everything was great. I had a great life. I have nothing to complain about. When I turned 8, I got baptized. I was really excited. I read the Book of Mormon at that point. I was a big reader, so I read the whole thing. I kept reading it, and by the time I got to about 11, I read it right before a couple other big things. But by about 8 or 9, I was first introduced to pornography, and I remember a kid at school brought it to me he had a folded up piece of paper with a really graphic image displayed. I didn't even know what it was at first because it was, kind of zoomed in and pretty graphic. And I opened it and I was just staring at it. And to this day, this has been over 20 years. I can remember exactly what it looked like.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I think that's such a common thing
Yeah,
now.
it
And I
is.
think it's becoming younger and younger by the generation, right? And throughout this, I've learned that my dad, I mean, he grew up in an age when he didn't have access at the same level, but he, was doing his paper route at 6 years old, which is crazy, but at 6 years old and found a box of magazines, it's
Oh
like,
my gosh.
it's such a problem. And that's what I love working with young men on now. It's like, I treat it as when you run into this, as you will, and you probably already are, let's work on understanding how to bring Jesus Christ into it and not feeling that shame. So, I think pornography is probably one of the kickoff points for a lot of this. It led to a lot of insecurity, shame, and other things throughout my life. And, it's something that is I think in past generations, people had so like the pioneers, we think about them and they had such hard physical trials, but mentally we are just going through it. And so I think that's a big part. I started that. I, my, I went and told my parents about it. and another kid did. I went and told my parents, and they got the school involved. And then another kid they had shown, and his parents found out because they knew my parents, and they came over and thanked me, which I was like, well, take me for what? I mean, I just, did what I was supposed to do. And it wasn't some big act. It was just telling my parents, hey, this was weird,
Which is
So,
amazing that you felt like you could talk to your parents about that.
yeah, I mean, that's great parents that way. Me and my dad, he's probably been the biggest help for me because he's always been very open. But when I got to about 12 years old, before I got the priesthood, I read the Book of Mormon again. And I just loved the gospel. I was so I just wanted to be engaged in it. So by the time I was about a little between 12 and 13, I prayed and I felt like I should get my patriarchal blessing. And that's a fairly young age for that, for people that don't know. And I went and requested it, and they said, yeah, let's interview you. Let's talk about it. Like, you are fairly young. You don't have to get it this early. And I felt so strongly spiritually that I had to get it. And so I got it. And I didn't understand much of it at that point. But it was, to this day, top 3, but the strongest spiritual experience of my life to that point and for the next 10, 15 years. And it contained some promises that were fairly significant for me, and that talked about roles I had to play in coming events and things that I didn't know what to think of, but I felt the spirit and I knew what it was. So my parents took me and we just drove around for probably an hour. Sorry.
It's okay.
An hour and a half after it, and just cried because of what was said. And so I remember that. And I think that's what in some ways differs from some of the things I've heard in my experience, is that because of that, and there were a lot of sins I've committed and things I've done where I ignored Jesus Christ and I've ignored the gospel, but I never went anti. And I don't think I could because of that moment. And so while I was definitely not being good as a disciple of Christ for a long time, and I was pulling other people away in a lot of cases, I was never anti, and I actually stood up for the church in some cases. So I think that made it, a little bit of a difference. But the church I've had a lot of experience with leaders that I could see other people take as these are bad people and, different things. But I feel nothing but love for all of them. I mean, we're all just people trying to make it in an imperfect church. And it has such a crazy, crazy cool goal to unite us all and be Zion, right? And so that was huge for me. I don't know if I would be in the church if I hadn't had that experience. And so I always encourage people to get their patriarchal blessings. I encourage the priest quorum that I worked with and different people. If you haven't got it, you should think about it. I just think it's so, especially for those youth years, because mine talked a lot about what was going to go on while I was fairly young. And so I was happy that I got it then. I still to this day remember what it felt like, and I knew what the spirit was because of that. But things started to shift because of those insecurities, right? So the big experience that I really think was the hinge point for me was I went into 8th grade. We got a health teacher. They started teaching us, and there's a lot of controversy about whether she went over the line, but she started teaching about, how to do an abortion at home, how to, all these different positions of sexual stuff. And she would let you write any anonymous card, and she would answer it. And so people, what 8th graders are going to not write something, that just bad, foul. So they would write these things and she would answer them in class. And so it was kind of weird, but everyone loved it. It was so people wanted to go to the class. They were all excited. And so one of my friends, it was actually the kid that had come and said his parents had come and said, thank you for me for the pornography thing. He was still around, and he told his parents about it, and they came and asked my mom. So my mom came and asked me about it. I told her, yeah, it's kind of weird. They're teaching all this stuff. I don't really know what to think about it, but, I just ignore it. And my mom was furious, and my mom is very protective, but she gets to be very aggressive in situations like this. And so she goes and lights the torch and, goes after this teacher.
Mama Bear comes out, which,
exactly.
I mean, can't say that I blame her.
No,
I'd probably do the same thing.
Yeah, and this was kind of before. And now I feel like it's kind of more popular in some ways. We've had more controversy over things in school, but back then it was kind of just you send your kids off. It felt like it, and you just, whatever happens. And so my mom went and got news stations involved. Everything was going on. There's still news reports you can go pull up about this. They investigated. The teacher was fired and not allowed to teach in the state of Utah after that point. But a lot of people didn't agree with it, right? It was that they thought that, kind of like that, cancel culture thing of, my mom just going after her. And so what happened was everyone at school just overnight blamed me for it. And they all
Mm.
liked this teacher. And it was weird. It was such a shift. Like the entire day for months, they would just call me the snitch, and they would, say these things, and they all hated me for it. Like, and so that was, I think, a big hitch point. And then what really made this difficult, and as I say this, I want to also reiterate that I don't blame any of these leaders. They were doing what they thought was right. But this happened with all the kids in my ward were involved in this. My bishop's wife worked at the school and was close friends with the teacher. And we had, it was one of those things they decided to address from the pulpit, and they said something about it, and they pretty much said that it was overblown and that it shouldn't have been done. And I felt when at school I was already being attacked, I took that very personally. And it wasn't that I felt an offense against them. I just felt like everyone was against me. And my grandpa was in my ward at that point. He wasn't long after that, but I still remember this because my grandpa was always that guy that was like, you always sustain the leaders and you never push back. They're doing what they can, right? And he got up and bore his testimony, and he pushed back on that in that same meeting. And how you never know if that's right, or I'm not justifying anything, but it made me feel like he loved me. And someone had my back. And so sorry.
It's okay.
It's funny because I feel like I don't have any thing with this left, but I'm bringing this up. I feel the spirit, and I feel that everything happens this way for a reason. But I think at that point, I kind of, went reclusive at school. I was getting deeper into pornography at that point. My parents didn't really know, right? I was searching it out on my own. My parents had pretty good locks on stuff, but I borrowed an iPod Touch, from a kid, and using that and different things. And so things started to progress. I got into a new friend group. I was pushing into what I wanted to be at that point. I just wanted people to like me. And that was where things started to fail, right? But I started drinking at school. Kids would bring vodka from their parents' stuff at school. I started smoking cigarettes, marijuana, anything. I'd try anything that we had. I'd try, painkiller, different things. So we were kind of messing around with all that. We had some parents that would give us that stuff from some of our friends, which, is crazy to look back on at this point to me. I had a really rocky relationship with my bishop from that point, a lot because, too, I had a hard relationship with his daughter. We kind of had that flirtatious 12-year-old relationship, and then it went sour, and, he was mad at me. And it was a hard time, so I didn't feel like I could go to him at that point. And so I kind of felt bad about it sometimes, but I didn't really know what to think. It was just what we were doing. So the next couple of years were kind of like that. I got involved with, messing around with stupid stuff I shouldn't have with women very early on, around 13. And so that stuff started. And I would say mostly we just thought we were having a good time, right? We just thought we were having fun. And then I had some things that kind of pulled me back, which were nice. I one night was sneaking out. I snuck out every night for 2 months straight. We went and met people. But I went and I got pulled over and taken by the police. I was like 13, 14, I think. And, they took me in for curfew and then found that I had some drug paraphernalia on me. And so I was charged with that, which as a minor, I had to go and do some community service and do these things. And my parents were so mad and I felt so bad. So I was like, I'm going to clean it up. So the next day I had some marijuana still, took it to a kid at school because I was like, I don't want this. I should have flushed it, but I was like, I'll just give it to one of my friends. He gets caught with it that day. This is the next day, he gets caught, tells him I gave it to him, and they charge me with drug distribution from the school district. Which, to me, I'm like, I gave it to him for free. There's like drug distribution, and they charged me with 180-day school suspension. So it was a separation point, and I got to be separate, and my mom kept me completely locked down. Like my friends came, and my mom would come on the porch and talk with them if they came, and, and she wouldn't let me out. And I was stuck at home and I didn't love it. It wasn't a good time for me. I hated it and I was locked out of everything, but it was a good learning experience. And so I get my homework there. I missed the first little bit of high school because of it, because it carried. And everyone kind of said things. And right before that happened, my seminary teacher, I'd had a seminary teacher that I pushed really hard. And when I say this, I don't hold anything against him because I was so obnoxious and I was so pushy and, so sarcastic. But he told me one day, it was the last day I went to seminary, he told me that there was no hope for me and that if there was a hell, I was going to it.
Ooh.
And I pushed him. So, I'm not saying that that's his fault, but all this stuff happened within a small period. And so I was like, you know what? I'm done with all that. I didn't think it wasn't true. I just didn't want to be involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
And the same point, my Boy Scout leader asked that I don't participate in scouting anymore. Um, I'd kind of led some rebellions in some ways from events and different things. So, and it's funny now, I deal with these issues now in my leadership positions. And it's so funny to me because, I look back at these kids that are having issues and it's like, this was me, so it's
Yeah.
good.
Wow.
I right after that, we got a call from a girl. This is just something I bring up because it led to this kind of concept of being fearful. But I got a call from a girl that we knew, and she said that she was being beaten by her boyfriend, who was like 4 years older than her, like an 18-year-old and 19-year-old. And we went to help her, me and my friend, and we thought we were tough. We brought we had like a shovel in the car we brought, and then her boyfriend that was 18 came, and he pulled a gun and put it in my face. And
Oh
so
my
that
gosh.
and it was funny because I always thought I was pretty tough. I'd, been in a lot of fights at that point, mostly lost, but I was willing to, I was like, I don't back down. And I immediately felt so much fear. I was frozen. And, I think that was kind of something that also shaped some of the next few years because I was ashamed that I was fearful. And I started eating into that. And so there's that. And then one of the things that was actually good was I went to my friend's, he had been adopted by his family member because his parents were meth addicts. And he was like, one weekend, he's like, hey, come up to my parents' house for the weekend. And it was the meth house. And I'd never seen anything like that, right? And there's, their 9-year-old kid that was there was smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. They were
Oh
all,
my gosh.
they were all doing this stuff. So I called my parents and I just said to my dad, I just said, hey, I need you to come pull me out of something. And that's all I said. He came and got me, didn't ask any questions on the way home. And then we talked about it. But that scared me straight a little bit. That freaked me out. And so I was like, I'm done with all that. I'm just going to drink. That was my solution, right? I'll just drink. And so the next couple of years, I just kept doing that. I got a bunch of tattoos at 15. My friend had a tattoo gun. I was like, let's go, let's do this. This is going to be a good time. So I just have these terrible tattoos, which are kind of funny, but, I kind of laugh at this point. But luckily, I always got them where you couldn't see them. But I was never happy. I don't think I was that depressed, but I definitely wasn't happy. I was just kind of skating through things. I kind of started cleaning it up around age 16 for a minute because I dated this girl that I really liked, and she was just, fairly clean cut LDS. And so I was like, oh, I got to be good for her for right now, right? And then my sister, right at the right time too, she was turning 8, and she came to me and she said, I want you to baptize me. And she had no idea my experiences, and I was like, I can't baptize you. And so because of this girlfriend, because of that, I was like, I'm gonna get clean. I went and talked to the bishop, and I got into a spot where I was able to do it. I thank my sister a lot for that experience because I think it gave me another good experience that I looked back on. So that was spiritual. That girl that I was dating and me, we dated for like 9 months to a year, and then it kind of fell off, and I started getting back into it all. Whole time I was still struggling with pornography, right? That's the underlying thing that kind of causes most of the other things. Um, and so that happened. I started getting all these speeding tickets. I ended up between 16 and 18. I think I got over 35 speeding tickets
Oh
and
my
reckless
gosh.
driving tickets. And for some reason, I thought that they would just fall off when I turned 18. I was like, oh, that's fine, and they hadn't quite caught up with me yet. So I did that. And then everything's, my girlfriend broke up with me right at the end of senior year. So all this went on. I ended up going to my senior year halfway through. They were like, hey, you've got 300 hours of attendance school to do, which I guess was because I was tardy to my classes. I had to go and do these hours. So I was like, nah, I'm not doing that. There's no way. So I just stopped going to high school. I started working full time. I was tying rebar, which is a really hard construction job because my friend's dad owned the company. So I started doing that full time, went and worked at Kennecott, and was just 17, 18 at that point, and just stopped. I was like, I won't go to school. Even though I had good grades, they were going to not let me graduate. So I was like, fine, whatever. So, and I had a good ACT score. Me and my friend got an apartment while we were still in, seniors, and we had parties there every night. I mean, everyone wanted to be there. I remember I took the ACT and I was super hungover from the night before, and it was a Wednesday morning, and it's just stupid stuff like that. So I believe God humbled me at a certain point, and I believe it all happened at once. So all at once, my girlfriend broke up with me. I'd been with her off and on for about 3 years, which, felt like a lot at that point. Within the same time, I went and bought a car. I think it was like $8,000, this little used car, and I got this loan on it. And then the next day something broke, so I took it back to them, and they got it fixed for me because it was, within their little grace period. And while the guy was driving it back from the shop that fixed it, he had a seizure and crashed the car.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and then I came back to pick it up, and they're like, "Hey, your car is totaled. It just got totaled." And I'm like, "What do you mean it's totaled?" So they explained it to me, and as an 18-year-old, I'm like, so what's going to happen? They're like, we're going to take care of you. And I'm like, okay, so they gave me a loaner car and I left. And so I kept calling them and they would be like, hey, we're still working on it, don't worry about it. But I had never even started like the loan process with the credit union. We had done the loan, but I had never like paid a payment. I had never, initiated anything. So apparently they never paid off the loan. And 3 months later, the credit union came and said, we got to repossess this car. And I said, the car they totaled? Like, I was confused. And I said, yeah. And they figured everything out. And so all of a sudden I had a repossession on my credit. But that was really tough. So at the same time that happened, all of a sudden, all these warrants started being issued for my speeding tickets that I was not thinking about. So all of a sudden, I think it was about 12 to 15 different courts coming after me for money and from different cities. And I couldn't pay that. And right then I moved up to Utah State and started going to school there. And I had to take a semester off, and I was working 2 jobs and full time and, and paying everything I had to these fines. And so during this time, though, I'm still messing around. I get caught up at the Howell, with some intoxication stuff, and they arrest me for my speeding ticket warrants. That was of 3 times I was pulled in, and each time I was able to get out quickly because, I just paid off what they owed at that moment. But I was arrested 3 times. I was trying really hard at that point. And so during all that, I finally went to my dad. I said, let's get this right. I need to come back to God. And here's my fake ID. I cut it up, and, I'm done. So he took me, we went and started the repentance process. I got with my bishop, and they recommended a disciplinary council, which I wasn't sure about that. So I wasn't sure what that was, so I went and looked in and read into it, and kind of scared me because it's like, oh, you could be excommunicated, and I think they needed me to know it was serious, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that experience was such a blessing. They took me in, and they just showed me so much love. And my dad was in the bishopric at that point, so he was in the meetings too, and he kind of knew everything. We had an open relationship, but it was nice to confess it all. I let it all out, and I just said, here it is. And we started that process, and I was able to kind of get in a better spot. Well, you know how it goes. It took me 3 or 4 years to really start to actively start living the right way. I'd still slip on all these things. So I started getting back into it. I was kind of able to, go through that disciplinary council and get into a better position. Everything started to get better once I started repenting. I kept falling back. My friends wanted me to drink with them, and I kept doing it at some points, and, it pushed me back. And I had a hard time with, relationships with girls that I was trying to date, all that stuff. But my goal was to get through the temple. I really wanted to get my downloads out, but I was about 23, 24 at the point that I was seriously engaged in working on that. And I just wanted it so bad. So I turned off my phone for a couple months and worked with my bishop, and I got it done. I was able to stay away from people, and I was able to go through the temple. And right before that happened, I got my limited use recommend back, and I went to the temple, and I'd kept it pretty quiet that I was working on this. And I went to the temple, and I didn't know this. My grandpa was working there, and he's working the front desk, and he had no idea that I was working on all this, right? And so he just started breaking down and crying, and he gave me a hug, and he told me a while ago that to this day, that's one of the best experiences of his life. And, it's so nice to have supportive people, because I know not everybody does. So I'm very grateful for that. But there's little experiences like that kept me in a good place. And then right after I went through the temple, we had our state conference. It was up at Utah State. And the state presidency asked me to speak at the stake leadership meeting on pornography. And it was a great experience for me because it was very raw. But I was able to go speak in front of all the returned missionaries and all these people that I looked at. I was like, you've been better than me. And just look at them in the eyes and say, this is the struggle. And there was a 70 there, but he came back for me and just told me how much he loved me and gave me a hug. And I felt the spirit so strong that I knew I was in the right place. And after that, the bishops told me that they had so many people coming in and repenting of, pornography usage. And it made me feel so good because of the struggle that I've had, and because, getting this out in the open is the most important thing, right? So that happened. That was great for me. I was going through the 12-step program with the church, and I kind of hated going to those because it is more vulnerable than I like to be, but I was like, I'll do anything, right? So I was just kind of trying to get back to being a normal member of the church. And I always felt like I would go to church and I never felt like I belonged. Then it was my own insecurities. And I would go and I would struggle, and I, just keep struggling. So for years, that's kind of how it went. And then by the time I was 23, I just said, I'm not dating again until I can date someone that will keep me in the church. Like that was important to me. So I took 3 years off of dating. I came back, I moved back home. I've had such incredible bishops through this whole experience. Like I have so much gratitude to so many bishops. Um, and so I just kept going. I was, trying to work on it. I was getting better. And then I met my wife and everything changed. It was immediate. I went 2 weeks in. I told her everything. I told her, these are all my experiences. This is my baggage. This is my experience with people. And I need you to understand this because our connection is too good already that I need you to know all this and know if you need to walk. And she took it all as like, oh, that's great. I can see where you're at, and didn't bother her at all. And that was just another crazy experience to me. And, I talked to her about pornography. I talked to her about, I can't guarantee I won't struggle with this. I'm trying, and I promise you that I'll keep trying, but that's all I can say. And so we went through that process, and she's, just got back from a mission in France, and she's, just never done anything seems like wrong, and she was so loving to me, and she's such a blessing to me. So that was helpful. We got married in the temple, which I didn't know if would happen. I was still struggling, but we made it work. And what's funny is at that point, we had been going to the temple, getting ready for all that, and then we kind of plateaued. And we were just, normal members. We'd show up when we showed up, and we were kind of, sometimes we'd eat out Sunday. And I'm not saying those things are bad, but, we just kind of casual. And everyone has their own spiritual journey with all this stuff. So we were just kind of casual. We went to church most of the time, but sometimes we missed it. And I think I was a bad influencer a little bit on those, she was kind of getting comfortable, and it was all that. And so then about 2.5 years ago, this is when things really shifted. If things are fine, I'm going good. But about 2.5, 3 years ago, I had some experiences that really changed things for me. And I was like, I need to change it up. I need to be better. And so I just started studying the gospel, and I got into some also just religious writings and things. And I started reading apocryphal accounts. I like to study that stuff. And so I started reading all this stuff, and it kind of changed a lot. And I was like, I need to start going to the temple every week. So I started doing an endowment session every Tuesday morning. And within a year of that, I was like, I need to work in the temple. Like, why am I not working in the temple? And at that point, I'm just having my second and third kid, and people are like, you're crazy. Don't work in the temple. I had people, telling me this is a really serious thing. You shouldn't do it if you, are in this position. But I felt like I should. So I had an experience too, and I don't mean to dive too far into this. I'll make it short because it's spiritual to me and sacred to me. But I've never had anything else like this since before that, anything. But I had a dream that warned me or prepared me for, I think, some of the things coming my way, and especially this calling that I received. I was prepared for it. And it said, pretty much what I learned was I need to get my butt in gear. Like, I'm not ready for this, but I knew that I had time. I knew I had a couple of years. So I was studying all this stuff. I was going to the temple. I was doing it, and everything just started changing. My countenance was different. I felt happy. I felt sincere joy. I think joy is the right word, right? And I loved going to the temple. I would have an spiritual experience, especially at the beginning, every time I was there. And it was just like, why would I not? This is my favorite place to be. So I had this great connection with the temple. And then I got put right after that time where I was kind of prepared. I got put with the priest quorum. They asked me to be a priest quorum advisor. And to me, that was a big responsibility because camps and things, I'm already busy. And it was the biggest blessing I've ever had. And I got to work with this incredible bishop really closely and work with the priests and see these youth at the age where I was needing someone that could help and be what I felt like was helpful to them. And so I love these boys, and I love working with them. And so I started doing that and keep having these spiritual experiences, and God is just speaking to me. I had one time too where I received one of the largest spiritual experiences of my life, and right before it, I had one of those experiences where you feel the devil, right? And he comes after you, and I never felt anything like that. And I think those things are kind of, scary to talk about too, but I know that he's real, and I know that he wants me. And so after I rejected that and was able to do that by praying to Jesus Christ, right? That's the way to do it. Is I had this great spiritual experience that helped me understand a bunch of things I was working through. And all of a sudden, I was starting to heal from all the pains of my youth with my bishop and my seminary teachers. And I didn't even know that at that point, I would have told you that I had let those go. But like one day I was at the gym working out, and I was reading this book and writing in my journal, and I just started bawling, and I had to leave because I was feeling this healing. And then I had another one right after that where I went to stake leadership meeting. It was the evening before where they do the adult session. Me and my wife went, and they talked about grandparents and parents and how they had an obligation to teach the gospel to their children. And they were talking about, I think it's like D&C 78 or 9. It talks about how there's a responsibility for us to teach the gospel to all kids as they come up to 8 years of age, and that we'll be under condemnation if we don't. And I realized I was holding a grudge against my grandparents who had been so loving to me, but they'd always like sent me white shirts for my birthday and given me church books. And I was always so annoyed by that, right? Just leave me alone, right? What's funny is that my grandma had babysat for me while I went to that meeting. I came back and I just apologized to her, and I just broke down and I visibly bawled, couldn't stop crying for 2 hours. But it was one of the most healing experiences of my life. I felt the Spirit come upon me and just heal me. I think that something was happening. It felt physically, and I just, I feel like I turned the corner there. So I've had all these experiences of God just showing me his love and coming after me and doing these things um and just working on stuff. And so I've been able to work in the temple. That's one of my favorite things in the world. When I got called to be in the bishopric, the first thing I said was, I don't want to lose my templeship. I don't think I can. And they said, well, let's figure it out and make sure your wife's okay with it, but I think we can work it out. And my wife is so supportive because she thinks that it's so spiritually uplifting to our family. And she says that on Tuesday mornings when I go, she feels the Spirit and she does a better morning with the kids. It's just this great blessing. About a year and a half ago, I went on a work trip to LA for the day. I flew out and I came back. So I didn't bring my gun with me. That was the first time in a while because I was parking at the airport and I was just there for the day and I didn't want to leave it in the car and I couldn't take it to California. So I left it. And as I was coming back, I came back at about 11:30 at night, started driving home, and there's this blue Mini Cooper in front of me. And they're in the left lane and they're going about 50. So well below the speed limit. And I'm like, what's going on here? So I just pull around them on the right to pass them. And when I look at them, I just looked to see who it was, and I didn't make any gestures, wasn't really road raging or anything. And they start flipping me off, doing all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So I just keep driving, like, doesn't matter. And then they start swerving behind me. And then all of a sudden they take off, start going really fast, and they start catching up to me. And they come by my car, and I feel this boom, boom, boom. And it felt like someone like threw a rock at my car, and then all of a sudden my tire blows. And I was trying to figure out what happened, but the kid was leaning out, and they shot 3 gunshots into my vehicle. Um,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, and it was just so weird. Like cops to this day think it was some kind of gang initiation because I didn't provoke it. I didn't feel like I just passed, I didn't like do anything. And so I'm not even sure how to explain it, but it was such a cool experience for me because I had all these other life experiences where something like that happened maybe, or something smaller, and you like shake, you're all traumatized a little bit. And I had none of that. And right when it happened, I felt immediate peace. And I had this feeling that the Spirit came over me and I felt immediately, your life is in my hands.
Oh
And
my gosh. Wow.
I knew that I was protected until God decided that, I'm not. But I felt peace and I just pulled over. I called the cops. And so all of these little things have just brought me to, like, my favorite thing is to study things in the gospel. I read books, but I also have learned through my experience that for a while I was just reading all these books and commentaries. And then I've learned that you have to actually read the Book of Mormon and these things to actually feel the Spirit in a way that gives you your own personal revelation. You can't take it from everybody else. So
Mm-hmm.
the 2 biggest lessons that I've learned is that the temple and the Book of Mormon to me are by far, not even close, the most important things to be doing, reading, to keep yourself engaged with, and to also protect yourself from pornography and other stuff. About 6 months prior to this calling, I had still struggled slightly with pornography. And every time I would talk to my wife immediately and all this stuff, but I was just so sick of it. And all of a sudden felt so protected. I got this 6 months before, all of a sudden I didn't struggle. And I was like, what happened? Like, I don't even know what's happening. This is the protection from God and coming into the calling and all this stuff. And what's funny is about 4 months after I got into the calling, some of it started to come back because I was slacking a little bit. But I went about a year where I felt no temptation, which was crazy to me. And I know for a fact it was because I was studying. I read the Book of Mormon I was reading it every 2 months, just kind of burning through it.
We got
And
to have
that
the
was,
plug for President Nelson's comment or what he said about, if you read the Book of Mormon every day, you will be immunized against the evils of the day, including pornography and other mind-numbing addictions. And hearing you say that, like, I felt that in my life with my drug addiction, that immunization from temptation. And like, I hear you saying that, and it's like, it's just so cool to see how that is such a true statement.
yeah, I mean, I actually didn't see that quote until after that. I don't know where I had
Same.
been.
I didn't see the quote until I I think he said it like 6 years after I got sober.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. I didn't even see it till recently, and I was like, wait, that's exactly what happened. Like
It's exactly what
it's
happened.
prophetic, right?
Yep.
And he's giving us a key, and we've always had it. Like in DNC, it talks about how we don't take the Book of Mormon seriously enough. We're under condemnation for it. And I think people get stuck in, well, I'm not learning anything specifically from this war chapter. Why am I thinking about this war chapter? But it's like, it's not the content necessarily. That can be good, but it's about the promises and the covenantal things involved with reading it and taking it seriously that God blesses us on and gives us personal revelation. So this point, I've just been working with the deacons now, which was, a different thing for me because they're in a completely different stage.
Yeah.
I'm fulfilling this calling. One of the coolest experiences, and the thing I think I'll kind of end on here, is that when I went to my setting apart for my bishopric, I felt so much insecurity coming up to that because my ward is just full of honorable and righteous priesthood men. And I was like, why would they give me this? Like, I'm 30. And there's these guys that like I'm working with in the young men's, they're better than me. And you shouldn't think like that, but I'm like, this isn't for me. Like, and that's not how God operates, right? He picks us as he wants and for certain reasons. And it's a lot for me, I'm sure, and for other things. And the second counselor and the stake president set me apart, and he started giving me my setting apart, and he immediately started pretty much quoting my patriarchal blessing in ways that there was the progression of it. And he hit on about 10 different things from it. And just saying there was fulfillment in these things.
Wow.
And he had no idea. I talked to him about a month later, and he was actually surprised. He was like, really? He had no idea it was matching the way that it did, but I was just bawling. It was kind of an embarrassing experience because, it shouldn't be, but, I'm just bawling because it's like, how can you, like, this is just God. And he's telling me, all right, you've done what I've asked you to this point. Now I need you to do more. And there's those promises of, we need to become clean from the blood and sins of this generation, especially as males in the priesthood. We have an obligation in the temple. And I felt such a weight come onto my shoulders of that. And I knew in that moment that I had a lot of responsibility and things I had to do, especially with the youth, but also that he would bless me, and that as long as I continued to fulfill my end of the bargain, which is just letting him in,
Yeah.
and, then he would help me. And so with all this, I'm in a place right now where my life is so busy. I barely know what's going on half the time. And I find so much incredible joy in serving the temple and in this position. It has been mind-blowing to me, just the amount of testimony I've gained and seeing people in their hard situations, and now understanding that everybody's situation's hard. We don't see it because they all hide it, right? But like everybody's situation is hard, and we're all just trying to be the same thing, and we just need to let God in. We need to let him approach us, and we all need to be that for somebody else. We need to be the means of letting them see God's love and acting upon them. So, 3 years ago, it was like, oh, I don't really like this person. I just avoid them, at church or whatever. They were hard for me. And now it's like, I want to show you love, and I want to understand you, and I want to feel charity from God that helps me understand the way you think. And I think once you get in that position, we can build Zion because we're all actively engaged in the same cause. And I think that is what could be most beneficial in this world right now, is just us taking each other by the hand in our wards and our communities and our, everybody, and not seeing it as a missionary effort in the way that we just, have to make sure we baptize, but in the way that I want everybody to be there with us at the end and in the celestial kingdom. And I want to succeed because God has done this for me. I want to be his means to do it to somebody else. And I've had so many people that have done that for me that, I think that has to be the goal. And at this point, my only intention is to make sure that I continue to push out the world, and I continue to love God, and I continue to just take seriously those admonitions and those things. And I think the most interesting thing about all this is my favorite spiritual experiences are all ones where I've received chastisement. And I gave the testimony about this recently, and it's like people were kind of like, oh, I don't like that. But to me, I'm like, every time I've received chastisement from God, it's been stop doing this, and it's been do this instead, and it's been here's instruction. And then I feel the most intense feelings of his love. And I think that's what's so cool about our Heavenly Father and about Jesus Christ, is that, they don't say anything mean. They say, go and sin no more, and they give you a hug, and so I have a testimony of the work in the temple. It's so important, and it's so edifying and sanctifying. And as a father, my goal is to, I read a Brigham Young quote recently that stuck with me that, if you want to sanctify your family, you first sanctify yourself, and then they will be sanctified through that. And we do that through our families, our wards, and our temple work and these different things. And the only way to do that is to embrace Jesus Christ at the highest level. And so, when you're sinning, invite him in immediately. Have him be part of the experience. Not that you want or prideful of your sin, but you're saying, hey, I don't know how to stop this. I need you, and I want you to be here and see it, and I'm not ashamed for you to see this. Um, and that's what I focused on recently. But I have a testimony of the leadership of the church and of Dallin Chokes now as prophet. And I have such a strong testimony that, there's so many people that have small issues with the church. And I tell you that, yes, we're imperfect. Yes, nothing can be right, but we are led by God. And there's no doubt in my mind of that. And a lot of times these little things that annoy certain people, they're meant to annoy you just to help you in some growth area. At least that's my experience. And so this whole journey is just that, right? Learning how to work with everybody else and learning how to work with God in that way. So I would just testify that I know the Savior's coming, and I know that we want to be prepared. We need to be prepared, and that we need to help others be prepared. And
Well, ladies and gentlemen, listening to this podcast, we have yet another demonstration of how God works all things to the good of those who love him. Like, my takeaway from your story is here we have this, I mean, we'll call you a troubled teen. I was also a troubled teen. We have this troubled teen going through all these things, and now you're able to use that experience to foster these spiritual experiences with the youth that you serve today, and to be able to relate with them in a way that other people probably wouldn't be able to relate with them. And it is so beautiful to see how God works and how he takes those hard things that we go through and he uses them for good. And even though if we could go back and choose a different path, we would, knowing what we know now. But that's not how God works. He takes our the hard things that we've gone through. One of the things you said was, those things that bug you and they annoy you, like those are those things that you need to work on and you are called to work on. And man, that was so good. There's so many things that that you said that were just so impactful. One thing that came to mind for me was, so Hank Smith talked at our Come Back to Christ event. We just posted his video a couple weeks ago, but one of the things that he talked about was how fostering spiritual experiences for the youth is something that it's the biggest indicator of if they come back or if they never leave, is how, like, the amount of spiritual experiences that they have had. And I see that in your story. Like, I see that you had these spiritual experiences in your youth and in your younger years that like really tethered you to the gospel. And I I think that's just something that, we can take away from that. Creating environments where our children can have spiritual experiences that they are learning for themselves. It's not us like forcing our testimonies on them, but creating an environment where they can have their own spiritual experiences. And I hear that in your story, like you made that decision to get your patriarchal blessing, and you had these experiences that really tied you to the gospel, and it was something that you couldn't deny. And it's just so cool to see how that works.
I 100% credit it to those spiritual experiences, and that's my number one goal as a leader with these youth. Is I've seen a few of them where it's not even expected outcomes or places you would think it happens, but they get this experience and it's just a one-off, and then another youth has it somewhere else, and
Hmm.
that's 100% the goal. And to get them in the temple is so amazing, and to get them into these places. But
Love
you're
that.
doing a great work with all this and letting them see maybe. I mean, it's hard to always know what to share because you don't want them to see too much. And at the same point, it's
Yep.
such a hard world that they're going to be introduced to so much, and
Hmm.
they have it so hard. And I think it's harder for them now, way harder than it was for me.
Yep.
And so we got to build them up.
Okay, we're just about out of time, but I have one question for you. Um, What would you do, like, as a parent now, how are you going to approach the conversation around pornography with your children? Like, how or what advice would you have for, like, me as a mom? I have 3 little kids. Like, what advice do you have for helping prepare our children for what the world is going to inevitably expose them to?
Yeah, I mean, me and my wife talk about that constantly, right? Our kids aren't at that age yet, but it's like, how do we do that? And I mean, personally, I'm very open about these things, and I'm very open to talk about them. But I think first off, they just need to know that it's there, and not that, I think people are scared to tell them that, thinking they'll seek it out, but they need to know there's danger the same way they know there's, other dangers. And it's, that conversation of this is going to happen at some point. When it happens, I would love to talk to you about it. I won't be mad at you, but I think, it'll be shocking to your system a little bit. It'll be something that you're not quite prepared for. And, you need to involve the Savior when it happens and make sure that you build a plan to continue without escalating in a downward spiral. And so, in a way that they can understand, I think I'll start pretty young with that, to be honest, of, there's these things that people do that we don't really do and that we try not to do that you're going to see at some point, and just building, I think that warning, along with building what you said, the spiritual tools to be able to handle it. I think
Mhm.
if they've never felt a spiritual experience or know the love of their Savior, then it's a lot harder to deal with. If they see that, they'll see such a contrast and an opposite of the spiritual experiences they've had, and they'll understand that it's wrong, I think. And they'll say, I want more of the spiritual experience that made me happy and gave me joy. And how do I do that? And then they can hopefully come talk to us, and we say, here's what we do, and here's the safeguards that we have, and here's how you make sure that you're safeguarded by things like reading the Book of Mormon, right? So I mean, I feel like it's such a hard balance with each situation, but
Mhm.
I think those things.
I love that so much. Well, Dallin, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was such an incredible episode. Thank you for just sharing your story and sharing your light, and I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. I mean, I love what you're doing. I've watched a bunch of them, and it's such an experience every time to just see people vulnerable and talking about something, that is so important. And
Yep.
so I appreciate your channel. I'll make sure and continue pushing it and sharing it. And I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dallin. Surf Clothing is one of our favorite brands. They have been supporting us since the very beginning. We love them so much. I think one of the things that I like about Surf so much is that my husband is literally obsessed, and I brought him in here to share his experience with Surf Clothing. So, Jesse, tell us.
I love Serve Clothing. This is the best shirt that I've ever owned for church and professional purposes. It's got four-way stretch, which makes it really nice because not all the time I'm at my desk. Oftentimes I'm moving and out and about. So it's really nice to have a flexible shirt that moves with me. I know that it's got a mesh collar that I love. I think the purpose of that is really to prevent stains, but it's also super comfortable. It's way more comfortable around my neck. If I'm at church or in business meetings with a tie, or whether I don't have a tie, it's really comfortable. It's got arm vents, which I love because I'm kind of a bigger fella. It helps me so that I can be a bit breathable, and I love it. And also, you can get 15% off a shirt from Serve by using the code COMEBACK. Hey everyone! As we head into the Christmas season, I just want to say thank you for all the love and support that you've shown my little brand, Memoir. I created Memoir because I wanted to have a physical reminder to always remember the Savior, and I wanted to help people to have something that they can hold close to always remember him. And it's been so cool to see these pieces out in the world and see how much they mean to all of you and how you love Memoir as much as I do. And if you have supported, I can't thank you enough. There's something for everybody. We have men's jewelry and women's, and also kids coming soon. We are going to be doing some of our biggest sales of the year coming up. So if you've had your eye on something meaningful for yourself or somebody you love, now is the time to check out our website, www.memoirjewelry.com. And again, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for all of your support. For anybody that listens to the podcast, for anybody that has supported, I am so grateful for you.
and I wanted to wish you a very Merry Christmas. A lot of people have asked us how they can support the podcast, and we have created a Comeback Podcast merch line on our website, www.comebackpodcast.org. All of the money made from the merch goes right back into the podcast. So if you are interested in supporting the podcast and you want to purchase some merch, we would love it. Check it out. Thank you so much for being a supporter of the Comeback Podcast and listening to our episodes. It would mean so much to us if you would like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It helps other people be able to find us, and we want to share this message to everyone.